Hi, and welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Today, we take a look at the farm supply sector. There are emerging risks on the horizon that may well issue in a new set of challenges for ag retailers. Joining us to share his insight on what may be ahead for ag retailers is Ken Zuckerberg. Ken is lead grain, farm supply, and biofuels economist for CoBank. Welcome, Ken. Thank you for joining us here today.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to be with you all today as well.
As we get started, a reminder to those of you that are joining us online, post any questions you might have throughout this session. They're in the chat screen on the right side of your in the chat box on the right side of your screen, or in the social media feed that you're joining us from. Might that be Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn? Now, Ken, there's a new report that CoBank's Knowledge Exchange put out on the U.S. farm supply sector, and you've highlighted a few kind of risks that might be on the horizon. Now, before we get into those specific emerging risks, let's talk about the current situation for ag retailers. What's the outlook for the spring planting season and for the rest of 2023?
So, as we look at the sector, right, ag retailers are currently in a position of strength. Last year, 2022, was a very good year, in fact, a record year for profits. And results for 2023 ought to be pretty favorable as farmers still have money to spend on crop inputs. Looking at the spring planting season, there are some delays that we've heard from our cooperative customers who obviously serve the end farmers that do all the planting. It seems like there are a little bit of delays in some parts of the country, still some snow and some cold. But overall, we're in a much different situation than last year. And recall last year during the spring, Russia invaded Ukraine and fertilizer prices had spiked. So I think the stress level is down and we're just back to sort of battling Mother Nature, if you will.
Your report suggests there's a down turn in the crop cycle that's likely in 2024 and shortly thereafter. Two questions. What's driving that expectation, and how could it impact ag retailers?
So just to be clear, no one is sure exactly when the downturn will come, but this is a cyclical business. And as you and the audience knows, ag retailing and farming usually has a few good years and then several not so great years. So we're moving into year three of, if you will, an upcycle in crop farming. And as USDA had recently put out, farm income hit a record last year. This year, it's still going to be good, but it's below the record level. And ironically, both figures have lower government support embedded in. So I would say that, we're really seeing sort of the underlying trends be very good, but less good this year. And after, as we sort of start parsing what's going on, what is happening is we see a give up or at least a lessening of some of the drought that has hit the United States over the past couple of years. We think that will lead to higher grain production, higher stocks to use, which would be a depressing factor on price. And that's usually the signal of a downturn. Now, the report and the risks, Sarah, that I talk about are not suggesting that the crop cycle downturn isn't of itself the real risk here. What we're trying to talk about is some other dynamics that we think retailers need to be aware of and actually readjust to that. And I'm happy to go into any level of detail that you'd like on that.
Yeah, let's dig into that because you're talking about these emerging risks, and they could depress the ag retail profit margin in particular, right? And
Correct.
challenge some of those existing business models that have been in place for years. So, the first of those would be changing farmer needs. What types of new products and services are farmers looking for, in your opinion?
So when we look at the current farmer and, if you will, the farmer of the future, and Aimpoint Research, a group out of Ohio that does some really interesting work, they've talked about the farmer of the future being a set of individuals that are much more collaborative, that are interested in accessing more data intensive services, willing to embrace technology. The simple point of all this is that farmers are in the process of transitioning, and the next generation growers are looking for a more advanced product and services suite. Um, when I think about, and I can also discuss on a one by one basis, but when I think about what the retailers can do in this situation, first, you want to always stay close to your customer. And if your customer is demanding something that you can't offer, you have two choices, right? You can ignore it or you can embrace it. So, embracing, I think, is the better strategy. What could some of those products be? Well, let's think about it in terms of um, sort of modern products such as biologicals or advanced intensive prescriptive products. There's a school of thought here that suggests that integrated agronomy, taking both practical science and data science, can add a lot of value. And I actually agree. So I think there's risks, but there are clearly opportunities.
So retailers may have to ramp up some of their knowledge base, is what you're saying, and bring on some more kind of experts that can really dig in and answer and provide this technical assistance that it sounds like the farmer of the future might really be seeking.
There's no question about that, Sarah. And I think what is important, and I often talk with our traditional CoBank customers as well as equipment dealers and equipment manufacturers. And if we all step back, what you can observe is that the OEMs, the John Deere, the AGCOs, the CNH, they're selling really advanced equipment that have everything to do with agronomy. When you think about it, precision ag is an agronomic sort of deliverable. So I think that they're also, and the dealers are thinking about how they can add more value. The retailers are also, beginning to embrace this. So I think what's very, very important again is the simple, that if your customer is demanding something and you're not in a position to offer it, you have to be prepared that they may move. The U.S. co-op industry has had such a proud history. They've done a phenomenal job, and there's such rich tradition and loyalty. But at the end of the day, it's always about the money in a down market, right? So again, I'm not as I said earlier today in another conversation, I'm not the arsonist and I'm not the fire department. I'm just telling you the way it is, the way I see it.
So, will there be certain segments, in your opinion, certain segments of farmers, maybe, I don't know if it's, regionally or by size or by, type of farming, that are going to be looking more for these additional offerings than say other sectors?
Yeah, so I'll refer you guys to Aimpoint and my friend Brett Scotto, who leads that firm. They've done deep work on psychographics, farmer psychographics, and those characteristics are such where you see patterns of the rural entrepreneur that make up farming. And what you find is that there are traditionalists that don't want to change, and then more collaborative, more open to exploring different tools, techniques, technologies. So it's that group. I'd also say from the work we've done separate from Aimpoint, we talk to our customers quite a bit about who they serve and where they think the business is going. And I would say that as, on a basic level, sort of small growers and very large growers see the benefit or have the need to deal with a cooperative. It's some of those middle size that are growing, that are young, that are partnering with family members who are also coming back from the farm with expert engineering and science degrees and really want to think about things differently. So, my big push for co-ops is hire young people, hire data technologists, think about your business differently, ask the hard questions, and really try to spend that one-on-one time with your customers like the previous generation did. So I don't think it's a far-fetched to sort of reinvent yourself in this environment. Change is hard. And as we talked about before the call here, change can be intimidating, but the failure to change could be fatal.
You think they've just kind of gotten away from talking and trying to understand the market and just kind of been doing the same old, same old? Is that kind of what you're seeing? Not to put you on the spot, but you
Yeah,
know.
well, there's a funny slide that shows Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. I don't know if it's that as much as the fact that farming is complicated, right?
Mhm.
And the skill set it takes, I think in the old days, if you had, sort of, your three main fertilizers and a few different branded chemicals, it was probably a lot easier to have a portfolio of products that you understood to deliver. Today, we have lots of companies from all over the world with lots of different products. Certainly, we have issues related to climate change and concerns about obviously the environment and consumers that are demanding more things, whether it be organic or just traceable, products. What did you put on that field? When did you apply it? Are you compliant? Are you meeting the consumer's own values? So I think that part is different. And that's where, again, if you're used to doing the same thing, you probably don't want to necessarily revamp your business. But that's where, taking the old institutional approach that the retailers have had, bring in some young people that can speak to and connect with this next generation of farmers. I think that's where there's an opportunity.
Another risk that you pointed out in your report is the low levels of working capital, and that's kind of despite farmers and ag retailers coming off a couple of years of some strong profitability. Why are working capital levels lower than average, and how is that going to impact that ag retail sector?
Right. So I did a presentation with a colleague a few months ago, and we looked at the USDA data showing that when you adjust in current dollars, the level of working capital, current assets minus liabilities, or said another way, available liquidity, that was lower during this upcycle versus the last upcycle. So just to be clear and not to confuse anybody, as we're heading into 2023, there have been less money is saved, more has been invested in plant, property, equipment, on-farm storage, equipment. Those probably are the reasons that farmers have lower working capital. What it means is going forward is now the focus we have. It means that farmers are going to be much more price sensitive. And typically, when the cycle turns down, there are some predictable behaviors. The first usually is they stop buying equipment or buying new equipment. They tend to then switch to cheaper seed, cheaper inputs. They may skip fertilizer applications. Again, I think that there are some predictable behaviors here. What does a retailer do? Well, the first thing to do is acknowledge that it's happening, because if you're in denial, it's only going to bite you later. So again, I would say the same type of thing where you want to be talking to your customers, helping them prioritize what is most important. If you can help them with crop budgeting and basically planning out purchases over the next 2 or 3 years, I think that accrues to the benefit of them and you as the retailer. So again, it's probably taking a more hands-on approach to it, and being very thoughtful and intentional. I also mentioned in the report that there are other, alternative products. If traditional fertilizer is not available, but or it's not affordable, there are certain biological products. There's a whole host of specialty plant nutrients that may, help defray some of the big costs. So what this is all about as a theme, Sarah, is being very active and proactive, not reactive.
And that's coming at a time where we've just come off of, supply chain situations and all of those challenges that have we've faced in the last couple of years. So we just kind of keep assessing that market and taking a look at what might be ahead. Now, a third risk that you identified is the cost of property, which of course varies by location and actually has increased significantly. What's behind the higher premiums, and what is that going to mean for ag retailers?
Certainly. So, Sarah, I'll parse your words just a little bit to make sure everyone's on the same page. So, it's the cost of property insurance that the cooperatives actually are paying, as opposed to, if you will, coverage on farmland. So, if we just reset ourselves to the commercial insurance programs, here's a few things that are going on. The past 3 years have been extraordinary in a profit way, but they've also been extraordinary in a not good way. The increased frequency and severity of catastrophe losses. So hurricanes, floods, power outages, derechos, for goodness sake. A fun fact for me is I spent about 25 years before coming into agriculture focused on the reinsurance industry, which is the riskiest part of the insurance industry. Never did I hear of a derecho, and we've had, I think, two in the past few years. So the main point is that the insurers have, and the reinsurers have borne a lot of losses, and rightfully so. They're raising rates and restricting coverage. So what does that mean to the ag retailer? Well, if you're in a single state and you have one or two locations, and God forbid you're in the zone that is not insurable or the rates are high, that's a problem. There are certain grain cooperatives that saw skyrocket increases in rates because some of their infrastructure, candidly, is many, many years old. It's depreciated to the point where the value is nothing, but if the insurance policy says replacement value, that puts a lot of risk on the insurer. So that's one of these dynamics where not so many people are talking about. You hear lots of my colleagues who are very bright talking about the labor issue, higher interest costs. Yes, those are certainly near-term factors. What I try to do is think ahead, and here it's that insurance piece, I think, that is going to be much more expensive for the retailers for quite some time.
So what I'm hearing here, I think, is that the good news is that ag retailers have an opportunity to prepare for these challenges before the downturn in the crop cycle. But there's some steps that they have to take. So what steps can they take to mitigate some of these risks that you're talking about here?
Right. So, it definitely starts with the leadership usually. And actually, the good ideas usually come from below the leadership, but the leadership teams have to embrace them. So, having very what we often call radical candor, right? Have radical candor in the boardroom and with your staff, and ignoring problems is not a success criteria, right? So address it head on. In terms of the different areas, if we could, let's focus on the insurance piece. So there are alternative risk transfer mechanisms where a retailer or cooperative can self-insure. They can work with a professional and create a structure to have risk-bearing entity that they have more control of. They might be able to take a strategic investment or have something which, coming from my Wall Street days, would be called contingent capital facilities. God forbid capital contingency. If you need the capital, it's there available at a pre-negotiated rate. So it starts with the conversation. It starts with the assessment of what's happening. And then it starts with bringing in some external folks or outside parties that can help guide and help be your thought partner to reducing risk and managing risk.
So we did have a question that came in here. Are you seeing growth in direct purchasing of crop inputs online? And is that a threat or an opportunity for ag retailers?
So I'll answer that, give you a background, and then maybe a story or two, if
Okay,
that's okay.
perfect. Yep.
So the surveys put out by a variety of institutions, call it Farm Journal, Meister Media, some of the others, clearly indicate that there's a desire, a high desire to purchase, if you will, online. Now, direct purchases is a little bit different because direct purchases would be, let's say, BASF or Corteva selling right to the farmer. And that seems to not be happening yet. But the fact is that it could happen, certainly. Every single other industry has what they call an omni-channel or multi-channel selling approach, right? So I think you can't ignore that. But at the same time, where the retailer has the ability to add value is that certain customers know exactly what they want, and they would prefer not to deal with a selling agent, but they would appreciate the platform. So there's a ag tech company called Growers, which works with retailers to allow the facilitation of product price discovery and then delivery. So a retailer can deliver that and not get disintermediated by being part of the connected platform. So I think that's an opportunity. Not having the ability to go, having your customers shop the products and understand what you have and when you can deliver it, that goes back to if your customer needs something and you can't deliver,
Mhm.
then that can be an issue. Now, the story. So, Sarah, this will be a rhetorical question, but do you happen to buy, shoes? Do you like shoes? Do you purchase shoes?
I like shoes.
Great. And virtually every man and woman has shoes and clothes. So many years ago, when the idea of direct selling came out, after Jeff Bezos started expanding Amazon from books to other things, no one in the world thought that women as a group would buy anything online,
Mhm.
especially shoes. And then this company called Zappos, they basically solved the problem, right? They said, look, we get it that you have to try on, you have to think about what if we offer you free returns, right? So that you could buy 6 pairs of shoes and try them on and return. So it's interesting how that particular women's shoes, and I remember reading about this, the words were, it's never going to happen. And then it happened. Now, men, being one, I tend to be a little lazy. So the idea of buying online, as long as I can return it, was always sort of the convenience factor. But, shoes are very personal. But even I, use the Zappos to buy 5 pairs of sneakers until at least order them and then keep the ones I want and return. So I would just say that these kind of things, when you think about business and commerce, ignoring the consumer trends are also fatal. If you sit down with a group of farmers or ag retailers and you do an audience poll on how many people buy products from Amazon, how many have bought in the last week, and how many have bought in the last day, let alone the last hour, it's amazing how many hands go up. So let's not ignore, that snowball, if you will.
Do you think that's what's changed? Because, Ken, I think you probably recall, I know I do, back, and I don't remember what time frame was it 15 years ago or something, when we had all of these online ag retailers coming up. I think there was a direct ag and everybody was gonna sell things, and it didn't go anywhere. Do you think it was kind of ahead of its time, and now, since we're all used to Zappos and
Yeah.
Amazon and all that, that it's something that's just going to be more the norm, and is going to just take more hold than it probably did back then?
Yeah, so let me answer that with some specific thoughts to embellish on. So I'm not sure if the complete selling direct online is the future, but certainly the online engagement to learn, decide, and then shop where to buy. That's certainly going to happen, and I think you can go to Best Buy and look at Best Buy versus Amazon in electronics. What Best Buy ended up learning and executing on was the fact that their customers wanted to shop and understand what was there, but then they wanted to come in and get better educated on what's in that computer, what's in that tablet, what does this TV really do? How is it different than the one I have? So the retail consumer has used and has been buying electronics from Best Buy with that value-added advice. Doesn't that sound a lot like retailing? Because God knows you know what the chemicals are and the seeds, and I give farmers so much credit for actually managing a business with the complexity that it has. But I do know, having spoken to many, that when they have an understanding of sort of the 5 or 10 inputs that they need, they appreciate having their go-to person help guide that decision. So if we bring it all back to center, I think you have to have the ability to engage your customer online, whether it be, selling, purchasing, picking up, or immediate education. Having that ability to have both the in-store experience and the direct experience, I think is there. And I would say that recently I learned about some of our customers, CoBank's customers, that have sort of 24/7 ability for farmers to pick up fertilizer. They know the product they need. They are comfortable with the rep that they've had and the guidance, and they order it and pick it up. And it's also an elegant way to save on that other annoying problem that the retailers have, which is getting the right people in the seat to help. So I think, again, there's no silver bullet. It's not like there's a magical one recommendation for every retailer, but this is a business where if you have the challenges and there's tools available to solve it, why wouldn't you embrace it?
One more question here as we wrap up, unless someone has any they want to throw in real quick. But are you seeing any new risks from a regulatory standpoint with product restrictions?
So we watch this, and certainly the chemicals have been of focus in recent years. There's nothing that's surfaced in the last couple months that's necessarily shaking me in my own boots, right, in terms of where things are going. I think on a very encouraging level, and I'm not evading the question, I'm just bringing another perspective here. I think USDA has done a very, very good job on being part of the conversation in sort of climate, what they call climate smart agriculture. And what I was very excited about was, in Europe, the Dutch farmers actually stepped up and said that, getting rid of fertilizer is just crazy, right? Because if you want food security and you want people to have, adequate uh, supplies of, agriculture ingredients, you can't do that by turning off fertilizer. People are going to starve. So I am that unfortunately regulation sometimes is an exercise in the death of common sense. I do think when the industry steps up to bring the right scientific explanation and knowledge back to the table, that's good. Now with the chemicals, that is probably the area we continue to research and focus on. If things change, we certainly will have a view on that and can come back and talk to you about it.
Very good. Any final comments or thoughts you want to leave our viewers with?
Well, as always, it's so wonderful just visiting with you. I think that the American farmer is the unsung hero in so many different ways, and I think that we should all be proud that U.S. farming stepped up and once again delivered during the past 3 years, which candidly I think were the most amount of change I've ever seen in my life. So I just really appreciate what they do every day, and I'm really humble and honored to have the opportunity to share my views with this group.
Well said, Ken. Thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing your insight.
Thank you.
That's Ken Zuckerberg, lead grain, feed supply, and biofuel economist for CoBank. We appreciate all of you joining us here today as well. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 sessions are available in on demand at feedstuffs365.com. So you can go back and watch this session again in case you missed any of it, or you want to get some more insight, or you can share it with your colleagues if you'd like to do so as well. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.